Recently, there's been a lot of drama and talk in the Overwatch Twitter sphere of newer players suddenly jumping from the metal ranks all the way to Grandmasters with the release of Overwatch 2. And the discourse about this has only grown recently in the last few weeks with all the matchmaking issues that the game had been having recently. Especially during the launch of Overwatch 2, I personally thought it was really silly when people would compare people's Overwatch 1 ranks for the last few seasons to their ranks in Overwatch 2. Anyone who actually played ranked in the last few seasons of Overwatch 1, when literally nothing new was being added to the game, were clearly much more hardcore gamers than the average Overwatch player. Being big Overwatch fans, these players also probably got access to the beta and played it a ton as well. So it makes complete sense that a lot of these players would see big jumps in ranked going from Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2. Especially since they would have a lot more knowledge about Overwatch game sense than all of the returning players who haven't played in years and the brand new players that have come from the game now being free to play. A larger player base just also means more people being in the higher ranks, and people will need to be brought up to fill those higher ranks as the player base expands. Let's say that Grandmaster is the top 1% of the player base. Let's say for instance that in the last few months of Overwatch 1's lifespan, that there were about 100,000 players that would play Overwatch Ranked for at least a bit of time a week, making them a consistent part of the ranked population. This would mean that the population of Grandmasters would be roughly 1,000 players. 100,000 players may be a pretty generous estimate for the last few months of Overwatch 2's lifespan, but let's just roll with it. Now Overwatch 2 comes out. It's free to play. All players that dropped the game return to check out all the new content. Lots of new players join in, just a lot more players in general. Let's say about 2 million players that play at least a few matches of ranked a week. This means that the population of players in Grandmasters should not be around 20,000 players. These new players need to be pulled from somewhere in Overwatch. There's not just going to be 19,000 new Overwatch Pro players that are just gonna magically come into existence because more people are playing the game. However, there are a lot of things that are wrong with the current situation. The clip I saw that inspired me to make this video came from Somjuu, showing an account where in Overwatch 1 was in bronze support, Overwatch 2 Season 1 ended Gold 2 with 54 games won, Season 2 they ended Plat 5 with 21 games won, and Season 3 they were at Grandmaster with only 49 games won. The issue with this is that it makes no sense how they could climb that high with such few games won. If they had a few hundred games under their belt, possibly like 150 wins or so, then it would make complete sense that they would be able to get that high. But only 49 wins to jump up a total of 16 subdivisions is absolutely insane. And because you only get a rank update every 5 wins, there's actually only 45 wins for them to get that high. For reference, most players, it should take roughly 4 wins for them to move up a single skill division. So for them to do it in 45 is incredibly strange. That's not even considering that it's 45 total wins and not 45 wins positive. So they also would have had to not lose a single game, which is incredibly suspicious in general. The most likely answer is that it's just a Smurf account. Or it could also be an account that paid for a boost or had possibly used cheats themselves or something. But the odds that it could just be a regular player that got a really lucky win streak and win like 45-0 is possible, but really not that likely. I think that considering that the account was bronze in Overwatch 1, it probably was someone's throw account or something that they just decided to use in Overwatch 2 to play some ranked. We at least don't have an answer from Blizzard as to what's going on with the unnatural SR gain by some accounts going up with unusually low amounts of games. This is apparently that there's an SR deflation problem, and that some players have had lower ranks than they should have been, and now their ranks are being boosted up to match the MMR the Matchmaker was using for them. While it's nice that we know this now, it would have been really nice to know this before the Season 3 started, so that people would know what to expect, rather than them just implementing it, no mention, and helping generate this massive conspiracy of people getting massively boosted by all of the issues that have been going on with the game's matchmaking systems. Especially since when you look at a lot of these cases, they do just look incredibly suspicious. And going up 16 subdivisions should usually take you going 64 games positive. And yet the account I mentioned earlier had done it in only 45 wins total, so they must have gone like 45-2 or 45-0. Except now we know that it was just the system boosting their SR, so They could have easily just been going 45 and 10 and just getting a massive boost from the deflace that they were talking about. Now let's start talking about smack about these new GM players and why so many high-ranked players have a problem with them. I think it all comes down to a few bad experiences with these new Grandmaster players feeling a confirmation bias that it's a problem with all of them. Earlier we talked about how the Grandmaster population has increased due to the Overwatch player base as a whole increasing. While a lot of these posts are about a single player in a lobby every few games, well, realistically, if the player base did increase by a factor of around 10 going from the end of Overwatch 1 to the launch of Overwatch 2, then there should be a lot more new players going to top 500 to keep the percentage ratio of the ranks in check. So a lot of these players are actually doing just fine and being in the higher ranks and performing well enough to not be put in the crosshairs by old GM players who were GM in Overwatch 1. But there's a minority of players that are bringing with them a massive ego and a ton of toxicity that are putting new GM players in a bad light. Because whenever a streamer that's a consistent high-rank player runs into a super toxic and underperforming player, they're usually a new GM player. And then if someone's a new GM player who's at least holding up pretty well, especially if they aren't toxic, then they kind of just go under the radar since people aren't going to check their profile and see that they're a new GM player who was a much lower rank in Overwatch 1. So this kind of just reinforces this stereotype going around of the new boosted GM player, because people only really see the underperforming and toxic ones, and not the new GM players that are doing just well in Grandmasters. There have also been a ton of situations I've seen of new GM players trying to blame Overwatch League and Contenders players for being the reason why they're losing games. That's never a good look for most players. Those are the only new GM players that are being noticed and posting on Twitter and be sharing around everything. But remember, that's not the majority of new GM players that are being toxic and underperforming. It's just the very noticeable minority that are getting a spotlight cast on them by high-ranked players for Twitter content. Now, to kind of tie this all off, I just wanted to tell a bit of a somewhat humorous story about an interaction I had with someone who is a new Grandmaster player in Overwatch 2. For reference, I'm a top 500 support player and I've been primarily playing Zenyatta this season and getting pretty decent results. My team had lost the first point of Ilios, and the enemy team was playing Wrecking Ball, so I swapped to Brig so that I could peel the ball more effectively and just keep him out of the fight for longer while my team could fight. I used Whipshot to knock the ball away from my backline after he dove in one too many times, and our mate had some strong words about it. He started typing up a storm as if he had a report that he had forgotten to write, and it was due in the next 30 minutes. He just had an absolute gamer moment, because I whipshot the ball that was diving our other support. It was at that moment that I realized that there was a god watching over us, and that he had a bone to pick with me at that moment. And to make things worse, when I told him that he shouldn't be trying to kill the ball, he responded telling me that he wasn't trying to kill the ball. He was, and I quote, trying to slow him down and make him leave. So to recap, he was mad at me for playing Brig and peeling for my backline because he, as May, wanted to peel for the backline and was upset that I did it faster than he could. He then just started berating me and being really toxic for playing Brig and trying to blame me for losing because I whipshot the ball away from our backline. Yeah, I just got curious and checked his profile, and he was plat the previous season. He was plat the previous season and GM4 this season, while I was currently top 500/GM1 at that time. If you stuck by this long, thanks for watching. Sorry the format and organization aren't the greatest. This is my first time trying something like this. I do plan on trying to make more Overwatch discussion and commentary videos in the future. I just felt like I've seen too much negativity surrounding newer GM players and wanted to talk about it a bit, and why it's not as bad as Twitter posts make it out to be. Hopefully this video didn't come across as being too negative or harsh towards the GM players themselves. There's definitely more to cover about this topic, especially with how it relates to the high-ranked inflation we've been seeing in Season 3. This is already a bit too long of a video than I would have wanted it to be, so I've started on a different video about that issue in particular. If you have any other topics in Overwatch 2 you might want me to ramble on about, then please comment below, and subscribe if you're interested in more content like this. Thank you.